Well, as you've heard, we're going to be in one of the parables of Jesus tonight. I've got my Bible open to Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16, I invite you to join me there. We're going to read it, then we're going to dissect it. We're going to see what we can find that might be helpful to us. Welcome, glad you're here. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here with the saints and singing so well. I know it means a lot to the congregation. It means a lot to me to have you here. And I hope that when the evening is concluded, you'll have said, it's good to have been here. Chapter 16 is right behind one of my favorite passages in all the Bible, Luke 15 and the parable of the prodigal son. And it begins this way in chapter 16. Now, he was also saying to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager. And this manager was reported to him as squandering his possessions. And he called him and he said to him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, for you can no longer be manager." The manager said to himself, "What shall I do, since my master's taking the management away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do. So when I am removed from the management, people will welcome me into their homes." And he summoned each one of his master's debtors. And he began saying to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, "Take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. And then he said to another, "And how much do you owe?" And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, "Take your bill and write 80. And his master praised the unrighteous manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, they will receive you into the eternal dwellings. He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. And he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is unrighteous also in much. Therefore, if you've not been faithful in the use of unrighteous wealth, who will entrust the true riches to you? And if you have not been faithful in the use of that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Now, I have to tell you that I think this is one of the most difficult parables Jesus ever offered. It's difficult for a number of reasons. It poses some things we're not very comfortable with, and it uses some language that we're not very comfortable in. For example, is Jesus commending this miserable manager for his dishonesty? And is he recommending that we be like him? And does he ever suffer any consequences for what he did to his master? These are the things that come to your mind, that come to mind when I read this particular parable. I like this statement, and I don't even remember where I read it. Years ago, I wrote it down near this particular parable. It is this: there is a difference in applauding the dishonesty of a shrewd steward and applauding the shrewdness of a dishonest steward. I'm going to say that one more time. Then I'm going to ask you if you understood that. There is a difference in applauding the dishonesty of a shrewd steward and applauding the shrewdness of a dishonest steward. Did you get that? Okay, I'm going to read it again. No. See, I thrive on feedback. So I can read this. I can read this. I can even read this. I cannot read this. I can't get that one. I also read this. I don't like it, but it is feedback, and I get it. Hey, look at the characters with me for a few minutes. Just look at the characters in this interesting. I wouldn't call this one of Jesus' most amazing parables. I doubt it even hit the top 10 of his podcast if he had had any at that time. But it is a really interesting parable because of the nuances and some of the unusual things the Lord throws into this. So look at the characters with me. First of all, the manager, the steward himself. We don't use the word steward very often, except in mostly union terms and shop stewards. But this man is managing, evidently, a great deal of wealth. At some point, he was entrusted with that. He earned the right to do that. He's not in the family. He's not like one of the prodigal son or his older brother's situation. He's not in the family. But he's been brought in because he evidently has some skills and expertise that this great landowner, this wealthy man, Jesus calls him a rich man. So he clearly has a lot of wherewithal, and he's entrusted a lot of what he has to this manager. Think in terms of Potiphar and Joseph, how everything was turned over to him, and he managed his entire wealth. Or even when Joseph rose to fame in Pharaoh's house and managed everything in those circumstances. The manager's got quite a bit of responsibility. He's no dullard, and he's managing, evidently, for a long time very well. This is not a new job that he's blowing. He's been there a while. And then he becomes either careless or dishonest. I'm going to suggest those are the only two possibilities I can see. He's either milking, sloughing off some of the wealth of his owner, the man that he's responsible to, and he's taking some of that and putting it in his pockets, what we would tend to call embezzlement. Or he's just gotten lazy and comfortable. And he's just not managing things like he ought to. He's letting things go. He's not being real firm in collecting as he should. He's careless in how he's counting out things. We sent out 110 bushels of wheat instead of the 100. Oh, let it go. It's not a big deal. I'm going to suggest to you that I think he's more careless than dishonest. And there's only one reason why I'd say that. I want you to notice the way the manager, the way the owner, the rich man, reacts to what the manager did. To me, it says everything. If he's dishonest and he is robbing the owner, it seems that the owner would have prosecuted. But he doesn't. What he does is just fire him. Now, if you worked at a bank and you were skimming off the top, I doubt seriously that the bank would say, you're fired. They would say, you're going to jail. Especially in this case where he is, it says, notice at the end of verse 1, he is squandering the owner's possessions. He is wasting them. Notice that? Wasting them, squandering. It's not necessarily a term used often of gathering and keeping out of greed, but rather dispersing to others. It's the same word used for what the prodigal did. So I'd suggest to you that he's probably not a bad guy in terms of being terrible and wicked and greedy, as much as he's just gotten lazy and comfortable in what he's doing. And so the manager is fired. I mean, it's an immediate firing. The manager is called in. He says, what's this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, for you can no longer be manager. Now, he's probably got some time to clean up things and leave, you know. He's probably given the proverbial box to go clean out his position. Because he still has enough control that he's got the bills in his hand. And he starts figuring, I'm out of work. And this is not going to be a good recommendation if I try to get another job. Anybody going to the rich man and saying, why is the manager not working for you anymore, is going to hear, because he blew it with me. So he says, a pretty interesting assessment of himself. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I don't want to do hard work, and I'm too embarrassed and proud to beg. Too proud to beg. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to prepare things so that when I'm gone from this job, there are people who will take care of me because I'm going to take care of them now. And it is in that, and let me say this, to his credit, he doesn't just wish his problems away. He doesn't sit stymied by all this. Oh no, what am I going to do? I don't know what I can do. Maybe he won't fire me. Maybe if I go back and beg. He realizes the circumstances and situation he's in, and he doesn't just hope for better things. Well, I'll just go out there. Maybe there's another job somewhere, some other rich owner who's not going to do a background check on me. He doesn't become paralyzed with fear, and he doesn't just run. He devises a plan. We'll talk about the plan in a moment. Now let's talk about the master, the rich owner. Because as you look at the story and start analyzing the details, you come to see that he's probably not an incredibly honorable man. He is the owner of the goods and the debts that the manager will manipulate. And he is evidently used to dealing with unscrupulous people. Did you ever think about the fact that the people who are doing business with him have absolutely no problem at all altering their bills? Did you ever think about that? I mean, these are not honest people. There's not one of them in the story that says, no, I'm not going to change that. I owe him 100 bushels. I'm paying him 100 bushels. We have a good relationship, and I don't want to jeopardize that. I don't want a bad reputation, and I don't want a bad relationship with him. No, I will pay him what I owe him. Not one of them does that. Which says something, I think, about both parties. The people that the manager is dealing with are not honest people. But they're probably doing what they do because they have no respect or regard for the rich man they are dealing with. Now, maybe they think we're sticking it to the big guy, or maybe the rich man hasn't always dealt scrupulously with them. So in this situation, you've got people who are business-oriented, who are themselves demonstrating dishonesty in this relationship. And theirs is not prompted by their stress and distress. They're doing it for themselves. Evidently, he's a pretty worldly man, this rich man. And let me suggest one more reason why I think he's probably a pretty worldly man. When he finds out what the manager has done, he praises him. I mean, that's what the text says. His master praised the unrighteous manager because he had acted shrewdly. I got to give it to the guy. That's pretty smart. What he did, I'm speaking the words of the rich owner. I got to give it to him. Really smart move on his part. So what is it that the manager does? Just to make sure you understand. He goes to the people who owe goods or money to his master, and he has them reduce the amounts they owe. And then when they pay the lesser amount, it isn't that he collects or pockets the money, it stays with them. But what he does collect and pocket is their obligation to him. Hey, I scratched your back. It's time for you to scratch mine. I don't know how he's going to use that. I don't know how long he can live off that, because I don't know how many people he went to. There are only 2 of them mentioned, but it seems very clear. Each of the master's debtors, he began saying, he probably has a long list of people he goes to. And the bills are altered one by one, with the idea perhaps that this man is going to be able to go back to them, maybe to say something like this: hey, I'm looking for a job, can you give me a good recommendation? Ooh, I don't know. Well, I'm just thinking about the 80 bushels you paid when it should have been 100. You think you might write me that recommendation now? Or, hey, I need a place to stay. I just got evicted from my house. And he says, well, I don't know if I can keep you. I don't know if I can take you in. He said, well, I just thought I'd ask. 50 measures of oil. Remember when you owed 100? Just asking. And so he knows what he's doing. And if he does that with all of them, he figures he can probably survive in that world. Now, what are the applications of that parable that might have some benefit or value for us? I do not think Jesus is saying, so you just do whatever it takes to make it work. I don't think he's saying that. But I do think he offers for us in the text, we're going to go to it, 5 applications that I think can mean something to you and me. Application number 1 is this: God's children who have a great heavenly future ought to be as diligent to guarantee their future as secular people do theirs. You and I ought to be as diligent to work on our future in heaven as the people of this world work for their future on earth. I think the lesson from that is to see clearly what lies ahead and use whatever resources we have to achieve our goals. Whatever resources we have. First, I want you to consider, as an example, a professional golfer who invests in his sport or her sport in order to achieve a great end. I want to be a great professional golfer, she says. And what things does she do to obtain that? She doesn't just rely on natural ability. Well, I just have a natural swing, and I guess that's all that matters, and I'll just go pick up some clubs somewhere, and I'll start golfing. The golfer spends a lot of money on equipment, as much as he or she can possibly spend to get the very best they can get. The golfer spends hours every day practicing the swing, examining the courses, watching other golfers, striving for perfection. The golfer also works on their physical bodies. The golfers will work on making sure the arms are strong and they have good balance and that their legs are strong, because all of those things drive a golf ball. All these things are brought to bear so that one end can result. No golfer ever did all of that with the goal of being a good husband or a good wife. Those things don't impact that. How much effort am I and are you putting into being the most perfect representation of Christ on earth you can be? Listen to Jesus again. The sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, they'll receive you into the eternal dwellings. Learn this lesson from Jesus. Use the resources you have to make yourself into the image of Christ. all the resources you have. What this manager does is marshal every person that his master has dealt with and bring all of those to bear on his future needs. How successful would you be at any earthly pursuit if you spent everything you had on that? And when I say spent, I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about you spent your time and you spent your mind and you spent your relationships and you spent, yes, your money and resources of every kind on that one thing. Well, you have that one thing. There isn't one of us here, I don't believe, that would not acknowledge the most important thing in our lives is the future life in heaven. That's the most important thing in our lives. So what are we bringing to bear on that? What resources are we marshaling that will make that happen for us? That's the first lesson, it seems to me, that Jesus is trying to tell us. And look, I want to say this. If that one really has hit you and resonates with you and you need to stop and think about that, you just stay right there. I'm going to give 4 more points, but you stay there, because I don't think there's anything I could say to you tonight that would be of any greater value than that one point. You meditate on that. Don't play games with being a Christian. Don't play games with being like Christ. It does not happen without the investment of everything you are. That's what Jesus is trying to say. That man was smart because he did everything he could to ensure his future. Jesus isn't commending what his future is. He's not saying, I think he made the best choice of the kind of future, but he is commending him for having provided and prepared for a future. Don't live your life unprepared to meet your God. Second, verse 9, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness. I think what Jesus means there is, you need to use the resources this world has of a material nature to ensure that you push forward your spiritual goals. Use those things of this world to make that happen. Use it wisely. We can use money to serve God, and we should. So, we will invest money for education that will make us smart to earn money and provide a good living for ourselves here without thinking about whether that education will further our spiritual goals or not. That's not a blanket accusation I'm making, but I see it. I'll tell you how I see it. Let me give you an example. Parents talk to me and they say, hey, we just got word. Our child has been accepted at this university, prestigious school, Ivy League school, West Coast school, private school, whatever it is. They've been accepted there, and they're going to get, it's always a free ride. I don't see free rides much, but getting a free ride. And they're going to go to school there. And here's my first question. I know where that school is. Where are they going to go to church? I've heard naive parents say, well, we found out there's a church about an hour and a half away. And we're pretty sure our child will make the effort to go there. And I go, sure they will. Sure they will. Now, you might be saying, yeah, but Ralph, that's a prestigious education, and it's just a short period of time. I mean, if they can get past that, then they'll be able to make a really good living because they'll have a lot of resources in the field they're going into, and then they can serve the Lord. And I've seen so many people make that choice and their children lose their souls. I've seen it. You can argue with me, but I've seen it. I think if we were to present that scenario to Jesus, he'd take us to this parable. He'd take us right here. He'd say, you know what? Use the resources of this world, but use them to further your spiritual life. If it's not furthering your soul, if it's not bolstering your morality, if it's not bringing you closer to Jesus Christ, if it's not showing you the Father, it's not meeting the needs of people who have died to self, to live for Jesus. It's not. And I've talked about education, but the same thing can be true for recreation. Oh, Ralph, they got a new pickleball academy. It's the greatest sport, and it's new. And I'll tell you, I got a kid. He is incredible. His hand-eye coordination is some of the best I've ever seen. He's cleaning up on the pickleball court. I mean, he is sending everybody home with a black eye and no lunch money. He's the best I have ever seen. And so we're going to invest in him going to Pickleball Academy. I'm telling you, it's incredible. Well, tell me about Pickleball Academy. Well, it's 2 months, and they take them to this remote site on Bali, and they're out there all by themselves, out there in the ocean, and it's just intense. And I say, oh, is there a church there? Well, no, but you know what? He'll just live stream. He'll just live stream. Do you really want to live stream your life? You want to live stream your wedding? You want to live stream your funerals? Now, I'm not saying we don't do that sometimes. I'm not saying it doesn't have a value sometimes. But is that really the best we can do? Yeah, but Ralph, Pickleball Academy, got a chance to go. It's big. Big. Pickleball's just about to break loose everywhere. What about your soul? What about your relationship with Jesus? Because I really doubt that if your son or daughter is at Pickleball Academy practicing 8 hours a day, that every time they hit that ball, they're citing Scripture. And they may tell you they're praying for victory, but it's not furthering their souls. I'm not saying you can't do anything in this world, but the point Jesus is making is bring the resources this world has to offer to bear on your spiritual future. And look, he goes on in verse 9 to say, so that when the wealth of unrighteousness fails, do you know when it fails? When you die, it's gone. When it can't do anything for you once you die. Then he says, they will receive you into the eternal dwellings. When you're done with this world, you'll have used those resources to take you to the next world. And I don't know who the they are. I don't know if it's angels. or other Christians or God and company. But you can make friends of this world's goods in such a way that it will help propel you into eternal life. You can do that. Third lesson, verses 10 and 11, wealth is temporary. If you're faithful in a very little thing, you're faithful also in much. If you're unrighteous in a very little thing, you're unrighteous also in much. Therefore, if you've not been faithful in the use of unrighteous wealth, who will entrust the true riches to you? The true riches. Wealth is temporary. Jesus calls it being faithful in little. Take care of the little things and the bigger things will take care of themselves. He calls it unrighteous in little things. I don't know that he's saying the unrighteousness is inherent in riches or that it's just prone to that kind of unrighteousness. But note that it is contrasted with true riches. There are those that seem to be right and helpful and noble, and then there is that which really is. Fourth, verse 12. If you've not been faithful in the use of that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? We don't own wealth. We don't own it. We're just stewards of it. Everything we got, we're just stewards of it. What I mean by that is God has just given us everything we have and told us manage it, take care of it. And the management of it is what? Doing with it what the owner wants you to do with it, not what we ought to do with it or want to do with it, is taking care of it the way the owner wants it taken care of. Because we're going to give an account of how we use it. We're going to. So be faithful in the little things. Be faithful in the management of the little things. And then you can be entrusted with the management of the bigger things, the spiritual things, the godly things, the eternal things. And I got one last lesson and we're done. One last point. It's verse 13. I love verse 13. It's quoted a lot of times out of context. I remember the teacher that was in the class and was talking to the little kids and said, the Bible teaches that a man can't be married to more than one woman. And all the little kids nodded their head. The teacher said, where does the Bible say that? And one little girl said, no man can serve two masters. It's a right principle, but it's taken out of context. The context here is you can't serve two masters. You can't just live for this life and the things that it has and live for God at the same time. You can't. You got to put one or the other in its proper place. Money can become our master. And I'm not just talking about physical money. I'm talking about the material things of this world. It just calls to us all the time. And it's just baubles. And I'm saying that, and you know that, but we can walk right out of here, and the lure of this world will glisten and shine and attract our attention. This parable speaks to us. A material world and material people with material hearts and desires. Use them, but use them in the proper way. And use them for the eternal cause. Don't let those things detract from the God who has given us all we have and says, now use it for my glory. We're going to sing this song about our going to God's place, about being with the saints of all the ages. Take the resources God has given you and use them to get there. And if you don't know how to do that and what that means to become a follower of Jesus Christ, I am asking you, please, don't leave this place tonight without talking to somebody, anybody here, and just say, hey, I want to know more about what that guy said. I want to know how I can live that kind of life. They'll get you to the proper source of the word. These people will do that. And if you know you're not living that kind of life, I don't care whether you've been a disciple of Jesus Christ for decades, or you're a new disciple of Christ and you say, boy, that really hit me. That's where I've been, and I don't want to be that person. I want to be as shrewd as that manager, but I want to be scrupulous and honest and righteous in all of that. Then we're inviting you to come right down to the front and let's pray about that together. All of us pray about that together. Okay? If that's where you are, that's the call. You answer it now while we stand and sing. I'm pressing on.